You know, it's so funny when I do these videos. A lot of times, one point that I want to get across, I totally forget it. Now, somebody mentioned that they read that the voltages on the voltage from the house now is 120 versus when the radios were made 105. So I want to just say the better radios have a OB3 in it. It's a high voltage rectifier for the voltage. Now, as far as the voltage being higher in the house and going to the filaments, don't worry about it. A 6.3 volt filament tube can handle 7 volts. And one of the examples of that is a tube brightener for a television set. Inside the brightener is a transformer, and it kicks the 6.3 volt filament up to 7. So the picture tube will give you more brightness. But at some point, it then gets dimmer, but the filament don't burn out. And so you got the better radios that have a regulator in there. So there's no problem. Now, you could have a tube or a radio where the resistor in the plate has gone down in value. And it'll run the tube extremely hot, and you'll get failure that way. There's also your caps that couple between stages become leaky and shift the bias. You make the bias more positive, so the tube is conducting more. It's still putting out the same amount of signal, but it's running hotter. It's using more current to make heat, and you still get the same amount of sound. You may never notice it, but you'll notice the tube will go bad prematurely. All right. Now, as far as me saying, when we went from 110 to 120, no big deal. Now, I worked in life tests in RCA. I'll say that one more time. Life test. Now, we used to put tubes up at 10% higher than what they would run in a television set. The engineer would come up and he'd say, run this test, blah, blah, blah. And that tube would test or would run life test, burn in, whatever you want to call it, for 1,000 hours, which is 1 month. It's around a month. You just take 1,000 and divide it by 24 hours. And then there was periods of time where I'd get a slip of paper after I put the tubes up, 10 of them. I would give the paperwork to the girls, and they would schedule it. And in the next few weeks, I would get a paper in the morning. I had to take those 10 tubes down, and they get sent to the next room, and the girl would test it, and then they'd come back. Now, if one failed, too soon, they give me another 10 tubes to test. So that's how it worked. And you put it up in 1,000 hours, and we were running them hotter. So I can tell you, you can get 1,000 hours or more from a tube running at 10% hotter. We only ran it for a month, 24 hours a day. Oh, and it also cycled on and off. Like you're turning the TV off, turning it back on. Certain tubes only cycled off for a couple minutes till they cooled down. And then they'd come back on. And that was to find heater to cathode shorts. So, and it would cause heater to cathode shorts. So when it got sent to the other room, the girl would see the heater to cathode short. Now, I want to tell you, when I first got the job in RCA, this guy trained me, and he was a douchebag. There should be a better word, a more nastier word for him, because that's how bad he was. And he wanted to go on the other side and work on the television sets. And the same thing, those guys would put the same tubes up in a test in the TV as I would put on my side. Now, when this guy was working on my side, doing my job before I got there, he let the chassis go bad. So a lot of times the filament on the tube wasn't lighting. The high voltage wasn't working. He wired these. They used to have these light bulbs that sit on a piece of plastic. It was a neon bulb, and if you have high voltage on that chassis, it would light. Well, he ran other voltages over from the 300 to 600 with a resistor to make that light. So when the boss would walk by, it looked like those units were running. They weren't. And I found all this stuff. And the engineers kept coming out and talking to me, and they're telling me, your readings are making sense. This other guy, I said, I'll tell you a little bit about the guy. He didn't want to be there. He wanted to be on the TV side. So he wasn't doing his job fully. So between the engineers and my boss, they start bringing all these extra tubes down for me to test. And they've been in boxes because the customers have been complaining these things are failing. So it took me almost a year of working extra hard to make up for that little worm. And he would come over and he'd squat down and he'd smoke a cigarette and he'd talk to the guy that sat next to me. And he goes, "So how's the professor doing? The scientist doing?" Well, anyway, he got his. He moved to the other side. Now, his big boss caught on real quick what he had done on my side. Still his department. And the engineers are like in the background. You know, that new guy he's getting these things to fail like they should. And the data is matching your data from your televisions. So they start watching the guy and he starts pulling that crap on the other side. You know, and the boss can just sit there and he can look at the rows and rows of TVs and notice one isn't operating. And he'd send the guy over, you got to go fix that. And then it started showing up that he really didn't know what he was doing. He'd come over and talk to the guy next to me. He's making me crazy, but he's making you do your damn job. But it was so funny working with these engineers. And we ran the tube 10% hotter and 1,000 hours. So that I know the tubes in radios, they can handle a lot more than you think they can. But there could be something wrong. Somebody, scientific method, somebody interpreted it wrong, is running around. You know, the voltages don't match the SAMs. They don't, because we're using 120 instead of 110. Well, in all your NC 57s and NC 173, 183, they all have, I think it's OB3s in them. I think this is one here. It's a regulator tube. It regulates the high voltage. The amount of change between 110 and 120 through a filament transformer is next to nothing. It's next to nothing. 6.3 becomes, what, 6.7? Tube can handle 7 volts. But the internet is full of people that shoot from the hip. They might have a different problem. They use scientific method wrong. And they go around telling everybody, oh, you got to reduce the voltage on the radio because it used to be 110 on the radio. Now it's 120. Nah. You can't believe what a tube can handle. You know, you have tubes coupled with a capacitor. It becomes leaky. It shifts the bias more positive. The tube's still working. It's producing a sine wave. It's giving you sound. That thing's running hot, man. You can see it. It starts to look brown after a while. And then at some point the tube might do a runaway where it goes cherry red. But, you know, when all things considered, the sets can handle 120 versus 110. And 110 mostly was 115. You have to measure at the socket. Now, I had an RCA line meter. You plugged it in. I sold it at a flea market. You plug it into your outlets that you're working your TVs in at, and it had an expanded scale between, I think you can find it on eBay. I think it's went up to 125 and then back to 105, and you could look at that, and that's what the TV on. You could look at there's going to be a drop in the wiring. The further out you are from the box where the power comes into the house, and the wire runs up to the room, and you got a TV set on a tube with like 10 tubes, it's drawing a few amps, and the voltage drops on the wire from the box to the TV set. And this line monitor will let you know what that TV is actually seeing. And so many things can happen to a tube, but most of the time, if it's an RCA and a late model tube, it could be the tube itself. They were turning out real crap. They were taking out the gold out of some of the high voltage regulator tube. I got caught in that trap. They sent me up the unit, the testing unit. And I've told you the story before. And I turn it on. The tubes are running away. And then I go underneath and I see all these resistors on these other rows up underneath. And I got my engineer involved. And what they were doing is, the guy that took the gold out of the tube, he put on the testing unit, the life test unit, he added extra resistors underneath to change the bias of the tube so it wouldn't run away. But if you use the other sockets on the same machine, if you load it left-handed or right-handed, Of course, we reloaded it the way where it showed up right away. So I went home and I went my dad's tube caddy and I brought in some the same part number, RCA, plugged in, it didn't run away. So I had two of them and I showed Kenny, and Kenny sat there and he had to reflect on it because he's got to tell me something. So I asked him, I said, so the tubes my dad got, for this, they're new, they're old, new stock, and they're not running away. And these other ones are running away. And then Kenny, he starts to say, well, the guy on that tube type, he basically got fired. And what he did was he took the gold off the, I think it was on the, might have been on the grid. I don't know if it was on the cathode, but in other words, gold gives you more electron flow through the vacuum of the tube. Well, he took it out. He got an award and everything, but then the shit hit the fan. So in order to fix the whole problem is you take the life test machine and you ship it up to us. And then when we having a problem, they said, we have this woman and she's coming. Oh, she's coming. Might be not this month, but next month. And she's going to tell us what we're doing wrong. And I've rebuilt the machine. I won't go into all the stories with that, but so she comes up. This is the best. She comes up. There's all these engineers standing around. They all have clipboards. My boss is standing there. The dandy boss is standing there. And she goes, yeah, I used to watch him. He used to turn this dial. Then he would turn this dial. He would do something over here. And the back row of the people standing there to watch what she has to say, they start disappearing. So now I go back to my bench and I'm sitting there and Joe's smoking his pipe. He's laughing hysterically. We waited like 2 months for this woman. We had to do a lot of paperwork to allow her to come to from what the hell was it? It wasn't Somerville. Uh-oh. Yeah, well, anyway, it was South Jersey. You had to do special paperwork and pay her time to drive the car up. And it wasn't Somerville. Man, it was right behind the damn company was right behind my mother's friend, Albert's house. Right behind Albert's house was RCA down there. Albert lives in Rawway. It's Rawway in that area. They came together. Rawway, I can't think of the other name. My mother used to call it Rawway because she was jealous of her friend's house. Her friend's house was in a better neighborhood. But anyway, yeah, so this woman comes up. Well, I used to turn this knob. Sometimes I was like, holy shit. You know, I'm running this machine and nobody will believe me that the guy doctored. And then finally the shit hit the fan. And I just said to him, yeah, we're meeting it. I said, I brought 2 new old stock tubes home from my dad's caddy from his TV repair shop. And I have them here, and I'll plug them in that machine. They won't run away. And I said, a little bird told me if we break my tubes open, we'll find a gold-plated whatever at that time. And they all knew. They played the game, you know. And I don't want to be spending any more time on that thing. What the hell was Avenel? Okay, so the plant was on the corner of Avenel. It's a town, and Rawway. And my mother, like I said, my mother would always say she lived in Rawway. She didn't. She lived in Avenel. It was unbelievable. It's all in my head. It's all there. And hopefully I do become senile within 3 years and it all goes away. With my luck, that's all I'll remember. But I want to tell you, better radios have a regulator room. It's no big deal that the line. And then how far away from the mains is it? What's the drop at the radio? See, the guys on the internet, they know buzzwords. They repeat stuff they've heard, but there's no scientific method. I use scientific method, and it makes me nuts because you realize what you're doing isn't really working, and it frustrates you because you got to do more work. You got to do more reading. But I don't want to be around radios anymore, TVs, any of that stuff anymore. I'm retired. I want to enjoy myself, but I have to say stuff once in a while. You know, Shango's pretty slick, man. I watch him. He knows a lot more of the circuitry than I do, and then he's got these giant gaps. And I sit there, and and he admits it. He's like, "Well, I'm not really." I laugh because he knows what he doesn't know, and that's a smart person. You know, someone will say, "I'm smarter than him." Watch what he does, and he admits when he makes a mistake. I sort of do the same thing. I know I'm in over my head taking that stupid capacitor apart. Give me a few of those. I'll break one with a hammer. Then I'll realize they're glued together. You ain't ever getting one apart, and it's over with. But I only have one, and it's very hard to do any kind of repairs when you only have one of something. And in the future, those trimmer caps are going to start going bad in like was Marantz stereos and shit like that. There are Marantzes that used open bread slicers, as Shango calls them, but a lot of the later models use the square plastic trimmer tuning capacitor. So that's going to become a thing for you younger kids, and someone will break the code. You know, maybe he'll use a hammer and crack it around like I cracked around the wall wart and get it open that way, and then they'll show you, yeah, you got to change these plates, the insulators between the plates. There's a guy on eBay that sells them. Maybe, I don't know, but right now, I just had to make a comment about the people worrying about the line voltage being a little high. First step is you have to measure the line voltage at the radio, and you got to have a good meter. Don't just whip out a Simpson 260 that you beat the crap out of an over voltage and think that thing's going to read the correct line voltage. Like I said, I had a line monitor, an RCA line monitor. Go on eBay, they sell them. And it might not work. It might be too old to work correctly. But that's what you plugged in the same outlet where you plugged the television set. And when you turn some TVs on, you'd see that voltage drop and then the fuse would blow, and you'd be standing there in the dark because something was a bad power transformer in their television set. Usually they would fry and stink, and that's a whole other story. I think that's it. All right, that's it.